Welcome back to Hardball. Tea Partiers have famously said they want to take their country back, but no one thought they meant back in time until now. A small group of conservatives are clamoring right now to change the country's voting rights. Tea Party Nation founder Judson Phillips recently said that the right to vote should be limited to property owners. Here he is on his own radio program.
The founding fathers originally said they put certain restrictions on who got the right to vote. It wasn't you were just a citizen and you automatically got to vote. You know, some of their restrictions were, you obviously would not think about today, but one of them was you had to be a property owner. And that makes a lot of sense because if you're a property owner, you actually have a vested stake in the community. And if you're not a property owner, you know, I'm sorry, but property owners have a little bit more of a vested stake in the community than not property owners do.
Well, Pat Buchanan's an MSNBC political analyst. I'm not sure where he stands on property requirements for voting. David Corns, a Washington bureau chief for Mother Jones and a contributing writer to politicsdaily.com. Pat, this is a throwback. I mean, there's nothing in our founding documents, certainly not in the Constitution of the United States, requiring land ownership before you have the franchise, or the suffrage, if you will.
Well, the right to vote, Chris, as you know, is restricted to the states.
Right.
They make the decision, and that's why you needed a constitutional amendment to make sure African Americans could vote and women could vote. And I understand the principle behind it, but I'm afraid we're pretty far beyond that. A lot of folks who are very wealthy and contribute to a community rent property, and or they rent in places. A lot of retired people do. I've often thought that maybe it ought to be restricted to folks who pay taxes to the community, but can you really do that when some young 18-year-old's not paying any taxes, but he's on some hill in Afghanistan? I think you should leave it to the states, and I think the restrictions on the franchise, I don't think any of them realistically are going to get through in any state.
Do you support, if you had the opportunity, a landowning requirement to vote? Do you support it in principle, if it could pass?
No, I would not restrict it to that, but the idea of owning property... Let me say this, Chris. I often thought when I was out in St. Louis and I was renting, I didn't bother voting and stuff. I was having a good time. And the people that lived there and owned houses were really concerned about schools and about traffic and they really get concerned in the community. And there's no doubt in that sense they were a better citizen of the community than I was and than I am right now when I'm a property owner in McLean as you are in Chevy Chase. So I think there's an argument can be made, but as a practical matter, it ain't going to happen.
So, but I can't get you straight. Do you like the idea of, one last thought here before we move back to court. Do you think in principle it's a good idea to have land requirements before you vote? Yes or no?
Well, let me say this.
You keep your waffle.
No, I'm not. Winston Churchill said it very well. Anybody who thinks democracy is the best form of government ought to spend 5 minutes with the average voter.
No,
Whoa.
he said it. He said it was no. He said it's the worst form of government, except for all the others that have been tried from time to time.
Pat,
don't challenge me on Churchill. I'm the Churchillian. You're the guy with Chamberlain. Remember that.
He said,
you're the Chamberlain guy.
Pat, you didn't say that. Pat didn't say that when he was running in New Hampshire back in '96 and beforehand, but you came real close to endorsing this. I mean, Pat, you've long wanted to take us back to the 1950s, but Judson Phillips wants to take us back to the 1750s. I mean, this is just nonsense. And the funny thing about this guy is, Chris, he wants property owners to have the right to vote. Well, what about people who go bankrupt? Because he filed for bankruptcy a few years. Does that mean you get your right to vote taken away? I mean, it's just nonsense, and it shows you what's happening with the leadership of the Tea Party.
It is not. All right, look, the proposition is not to get yet true, but the idea that the franchise is that it's universal. Chris, you had a little test the other day where they asked they gave four answers. You had a multiple choice. Who's the Chief Justice of the United States? John Roberts, Hillary Clinton, Antonin Scalia, or Joe Lieberman? 28% got John Roberts. That tells you why are people, let me ask you, is it a valid question to ask, why are people voting for the next president of the United States who can't even name or don't even have any idea
you want to test, Pat?
who the Chief Justice is?
Go back to a literacy test, maybe a poll tax? I mean,
well,
what do you want? Maybe English only? I mean, where are you going to restrict it?
No, I don't mind. Let me get back to
English only. Yes, English only. I go for that. Yes.
Okay, so let's go through your requirements. Your requirements are land ownership, sufficient knowledge of world events and history. Where are we at? Would you have to have some geography in there or not? Or where else do you need to go for education? No, seriously, Pat, I think you would have a very elite... I thought you were anti-elitist. I thought you didn't like the cultural elites.
This is not a populist position.
Let me just say, I know that, listen, what I'm saying is that the idea of universal franchise, I don't think that's the greatest idea in the world. It's what we've got, and we got to live with it. But I do think people who put out these ideas ought not to be thrown out simply because they violate some ideological canon of people's political religion.
Look, I know people in our business, Pat, who I mean on television, who I don't think know hardly anything about America's political history or politics today. They can express left-wing or right-wing opinions easy. That's easy. That's gut stuff. But I would like to see a lot of people that I work with around this business, and I'd like to ask them, just name the presidents in your lifetime. I think they would falter. I think Sarah Palin might have a serious problem with some basic information. She was talking the other day about Ronald Reagan going to college out in California. She doesn't even know his life, the hero of your party. I mean, I think the ignorance is so overwhelming.
We should have
you want a requirement for people to run for president who knows something, Pat?
Let's have a test for that.
How about that for test?
Chris, you're making a very good point. You're making a very good point, which is this. Look, I mean, do we get the best possible decision on who our leaders should be from folks who don't know anything about politics or issues? Do we? And what I'm saying is, why knock these Tea Party guys when they at least are raising a valid criticism of democracy? As soon as these
Tea Party guys also don't know. They say they want the government out of Medicaid. They don't even understand the basics of the things that they're arguing for or against.
You had a press secretary, Pat, recently, a couple of years ago, in your brilliant George W. Bush administration, which they didn't want to know a lot of the facts. They had a press secretary. The United States, a president of the United States had a press secretary who had never heard of the Cuban Missile Crisis, had never heard of it. And she's representing the president on national and international affairs. So I'm baffled sometimes by the people that are put in these positions.
But you're making my point, Chris. If people...
These plutocrats can't find plutocrats.
Well, let me just tell you, if suppose in 1963, after the missile crisis, somebody said, I don't know what that is, and they say, who are you voting for? I don't know. Whoever they take me down on the bus, whoever they tell me to vote for, I'm going to vote for them. How do you get the best possible person elected when this is what's going on?
Pat, do you believe that the voters that you had behind you in New Hampshire and elsewhere could have passed all these tests? Were you ready to give them a test?
Well, they were committed enough to be out there in the middle of winter at a rally. They knew what I was saying and believed.
Well, that's
and it was
okay. Wait a second. A lot of people do that. You know, anyone who's committed enough to go to a voting booth deserves the right to vote.
You know, David, they knew things you didn't know. They knew what night the Knights of Columbus met. I'll tell you that. Up there, Pat. Pat, your crowd knew.
Are you knocking the Knights of Columbus?
No, I'm kidding.
This is Walker's Point.
No, I would never. But my family has grown up in that group. I want to tell you something. But there's certain bits of knowledge. I'm being lighthearted here that some people know and other people don't know. That's all. But I think you should know about American history before you become president of the United States.
Wouldn't you agree?
Why don't you start putting standards in?
Right, Chris, wouldn't you agree that we want the best educated electorate we can with knowledge and understanding of issues and principles and beliefs and history? I don't care who they are without regard to race, color, or creed, but who really knows something. That's who we want selecting our leaders. That's all I'm saying.
You know what I want, Pat? And David, I want to have a button with all this modern communications that we could do. Go to your laptop, your computer at home, and before you vote, the week before you vote or the weekend, sit there and push a button that tells you, call it Citizen, whatever, that tells you how the people in your district voted, state Senate, state Assembly, U.S. Congress, city council, and it just tells you everything about their voting records on issues like life that you care about or foreign policy more. I'd like to have all that. And by the way, with computer technology today, voting knowledge should be easy, and it isn't.
It should be. And
Chris,
anyway, we got to go. We're all over the place. Are we for property rights, yes or no, Pat? Can I put you down for property rights for voting?
I think it gives you a maybe in that.
Property rights?
It's a definite maybe.
Yeah, and stocks are included.
Okay, so you want liquid value. Anyway, thank you, Pat Buchanan. A little undecided on the issue of property rights. I think he's back with John Adams on that baby.